1864. Despite Union advances the previous year, the Civil War drags on. Ever hungry, the war machine constantly demands new troops. Lincoln must again issue a call for volunteers, an unprecedented 500,000 men. Shortly thereafter, Congress amends the Conscription Act passed the previous year. Seventh-day Adventists are worried. The strict new rules will now force them to serve and bear arms in the conflict.
The organization of the Seventh-day Adventist Church into a denomination took place during a very perilous time, the Civil War. Very dangerous time for a church to be organized. And while the nation was falling apart, our Adventist pioneers were coming together.
Previously, Seventh-day Adventists worked together to pay commutation fees for their drafted men. But under the amended draft, this is not a permanent option.
Well, the Adventists could buy their way out if they wanted to. I think it was $300 or thereabouts. But after the draft, they didn't have that option.
The amended draft law still made provision for Americans who were considered conscientious objectors. These were individuals or religious groups who had some firm, fixed, and sincere objection to participation in war in any form or the bearing of arms because of religion or moral belief.
It was during the Civil War that Seventh-day Adventists developed their conscientious objector status. Seventh-day Adventists were not pacifists. It wasn't that they were unwilling to serve their country. Their problem was that they were conscientiously objecting to taking another person's life.
The officers of the newly formed General Conference of Seventh-day Adventists write to Michigan Governor Austin Blair.
We regard the 10 Commandments as the supreme law. The fourth of these commandments requires cessation from labor on the seventh day of the week. The sixth prohibits the taking of life, neither of which, in our view, could be observed while doing military duty. Our practice has uniformly been consistent with these principles. Hence, our people have not felt free to enlist into the service. We would further represent that Seventh-day Adventists are rigidly anti-slavery, loyal to the government, and in sympathy with it against the rebellion. As a people, we come under the intent of the late action of Congress concerning those who are conscientiously opposed to bearing arms, and are entitled to the benefits of said laws. John Byington, J.N. Loughborough, George Amadon.
And Loughborough went to the Michigan governor and got an exemption for them.
The highlights of Loughborough's life, I think, during the Civil War years could be summed up in the word organizing. He is one of the key persons who goes to Governor Blair seeking conscientious objector status and gets a very positive response from Governor Blair.
With the support of the Michigan governor, the Adventists must send a representative to Washington, D.C. They pick one of the ablest men in all their ranks, John Nevins Andrews. He takes their case to the office of Provost Marshal General James Fry, who is administering the draft. While J.N. Andrews travels to Washington City, the Adventists call their own special day of prayer and fasting, asking God to intervene in the war, in the condition of American slaves, and in their request for status as conscientious objectors.
The Quakers have for centuries been pacifists, and everybody knows that. But Sabbath-keeping Adventists are a new group. Nobody's really sure who they are. So it's very important that we be organized, that we follow legal pathways to that organization, that we know why we want conscientious objector status for our young men.
Besides Adventists and Quakers, various faith groups have members who fall into this category, including Shakers, Mennonites, Amish, Disciples of Christ, and others. In September, Andrews finally reports in the Review and Herald.
I have visited the Provost Marshal General. He stated that the exemption clause of the enrollment law was not construed by him to mean Quakers merely, but to apply to any religious body who holds non-combatant views.
The Provost Marshal General commands that individuals who can demonstrate they are a member of a church professing conscientious objection will be assigned to duty in hospitals or to the care of freedmen, or shall be exempt on payment of $300. But even with their new standing as non-combatants, drafted Adventists are not welcomed warmly into the Army.
Being drafted into the service of the United States in October last, I presented my papers to one of the commanders who immediately put me under guard, at the same time uttering terrible oaths, calling me a rebel, and saying they were going to clear the country of such rebels as I was. The guard that was put over me was ordered to load his gun, and if I stirred 1 inch, to shoot me. 4 weeks have passed, and I have heard nothing of my papers yet, and I have serious doubts about their having been sent. There is another brother here who refused to take a gun. He was put under arrest 48 hours and then given 30 minutes to decide between taking a gun and being court-martialed. C.F. Hall.
Non-combatants or not, Seventh-day Adventists are serving in the armies and dying, just like scores of other men wearing the blue and grey. The Review and Herald prints the obituaries of Adventist soldiers, men like Hiram L. Bostwick, who dies in the Battle of Chickamauga, or the 2 sons of Charles Smith, who both die serving in the Army. For all the many fallen, the Review reports, their loss is felt deeply. On the northern home front, opinion on the war is divided. Many are frustrated, tired of the long war and the ceaseless lists of casualties that benumb the senses. While some wish to prosecute the war and give meaning to the great sacrifice of life, others are ready for peace at any cost, even official recognition of the Confederacy and the reversing of the Emancipation Proclamation.
But the Copperheads this is their last-ditch effort. They are pushing at full steam to stop the carnage. In fact, I think they see the end coming as well. Remember, there are many who believe in saving the U.S. as it was. Not as it is or will be. They want it as it was.
Abraham Lincoln, facing these realities in the light of an election year, promotes General Ulysses S. Grant to command of all Union armies. As Grant assumes his post in the East, a new commander succeeds him in the West. General William Tecumseh Sherman, at the head of nearly 100,000 soldiers, begins a march from Tennessee toward Georgia.
Here's the problem if you're Abraham Lincoln, is you need an aggressive general in order to prosecute the war to show that something's happening as opposed to this constant ebb and flow back and forth. So you bring in someone who's aggressive, but now you've got a new problem. They're not happy with high casualty lists, and so his popularity at least begins to sag and drop a little bit as the aggressive prosecution of the war brings these high casualty lists, and so you end up having, now he has another problem to overcome in order to win an election.
Not at all sure that he will win a second term, Abraham Lincoln leads the Republicans to join with pro-war Democrats in forming the National Union Party. After they renominate him as their choice for president, Lincoln remarks,
"I have not permitted myself, gentlemen, to conclude that I am the best man in the country. But I am reminded in this connection of the story of an old Dutch farmer who remarked to a companion once that it was not best to swap horses when crossing streams."
In September, General Sherman captures Atlanta, a key Confederate city. This boosts Northern morale, suggesting that a successful end to the war is in sight. Lincoln is handily re-elected in November, defeating Democrat George B. McClellan, his former commanding general of the Army of the Potomac.
And so the soldiers, both East and West, are seeing monumentous gains in 1863, late 1863 and 1864 that they did not see in the first 3 years of the war. And so the soldiers in both armies are going to, there's a sense that we just need the time. It just needs to be the time. This war is going to end, and it's going to end successfully for the Union. It's just a matter of time, and we need to give that time to happen. We don't need to be negotiating a peace. Lincoln needs to be reelected to allow us to finish this job.
After the election, General Sherman begins a 300-mile march through hostile territory from Atlanta to the port city of Savannah, Georgia. His army lives off the land, confiscating or destroying everything useful to the Southern war effort. For over one nerve-wracking month, they are completely out of contact with the North. Finally, in December, Lincoln receives a telegram from Sherman.
President Lincoln, I beg to present you, as a Christmas gift, the city of Savannah,